Okay, everybody. How are we doing? For the undergraduates, I've given 40% of this class already because we only have 5 chapters we're covering. So if you have done nothing, we need to pick up the pace, and I'm going to start following you around. And again, what's the best way to do stuff? Start doing the homeworks and the assignments. If you email me, I will give you the videos. I'm still trying to figure out how to use YouTube. You know, I'm trying to organize this big workshop on sustainable community economic development, so I'm a little overwhelmed. Just saying. So when I figure that out, I'll get them uploaded. But I think the other thing is if I hear from you, then I know you're at least functioning, because what's going to happen is if anybody tries to drop, they're going to want me to testify that you did or did not do something. So if I force you to email me and file drop, but the file drop works great. The MP3s are audio files, so you have to really use an MP3 player. That's why you guys are not being able to play them, because I don't think anybody plays MP3s anymore. You're just usually streaming. This is why iTunes has stopped existing. So I can video you send you the videos on file load. It works pretty good. Okay, so we're going to get started. So let me share again now. How does this work? On the Tuesdays, then we kind of do a little bit of the theoretical discussion. And then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, I try to wrap up problems, like specific problems with assignments or homeworks or certain issues that you may not be getting that you have to start applying. So that's what we're going to do. So let me just share. Don't look at my screen because you'll go blind with my stuff. So we're going to do this one. Let's do my PowerPoint. Okay, let's blow it up. Okay, so we're going to go to the start. And we'll go on our slideshow. Here we go. Oh no, don't tell me. Don't tell me that this is going to do this. Every time I try to animate something on this thing, I think it's working, and then it doesn't work. So let's try one more time. Yeah, okay, so same problem. Okay. Sorry about these animations. I checked them, and they still mess up. So anyway, what are we talking about today? Well, we're going to talk about how we're going to do really, and it's really chapter 1. And I'm going to tell you a way that I do it that's much easier than the book. The book does all these circles. It's very hard to figure out. So we're going to talk about it in a different way because we all know how contrary I am. I can't even follow recipes in the cookbook, so I have to always think of my own ways. So let's get started here. So anytime we do a project, it can be spread over a variety of people who may benefit or may pay costs. So a private project, it's talking about right here, a private project. This is a private project. A new tool, I'm so happy. A private project is really something that's owned by a private individual. So it could be a community member, a family, a business, a nonprofit. A nonprofit may do a project. That's not really in the public sector. The public sector is a government project. That's generally what we see. And we have a lot of different types of projects we do. We also have private-public partnership projects. And for the graduate students, we will, in the graduate course, figure out what's the actual cost of doing it as a private project versus a public project. So this is always what we're doing. And why are we doing projects again? We're trying to improve the well-being of the community. It may only be one member of the community. It may be many members of the community. It may be members of people in a variety of communities across the state or the nation. It just kind of depends on the project we're talking about. So we've spent a lot of time really doing the mechanics of the net benefits and costs of projects and how we figure out if it's a good project or a bad project. But now let's really talk about a little bit more about how we look at these projects. So a private project is done by a group that's not everybody in the community. A public project usually is something done by a government entity, and it can really impact a single community. Like here, we don't have municipal governments. We have the city and county of Honolulu, so we have a county set up. But if you go to the mainland, you will also have city governance. So you'll have like a town council. We do have neighborhood boards, but they don't really have money to do projects. They just generally talk a lot and kind of share information and listen to people. So when you go to public projects, you'll find on the mainland, like city level government, county level government, state level government, and national government. Now on the mainland, counties don't have as much money as they have here. Our counties are actually very wealthy, and they're also difficult to deal with because they're on islands, so they're kind of dispersed. So it's kind of more interesting here in some ways because you can more isolate projects to be on an island. You can also look very clearly at the different governments on the different counties and how they do stuff, and their projects may be very different. On the mainland, you'll have one state with a lot of counties that are maybe not as populated, or one very metropolitan county and a bunch of rural counties. So it's a little bit different, but nonetheless, the analysis approach will be the same. So when you do this, you've got to look at what the public looks at, and what does the public get? They get government revenue, taxes and charges. So those are some of the benefits to the public of doing these projects, whether they're private or public. Sometimes public projects don't generate much revenue. Then we have government expenditures. This is usually something that's very geared to the public project. But at the end of the day, we also sometimes give benefits to private individuals. In this state, for example, we give credits to film production companies. And when you do that, then you're actually giving services to that private entity for a private project. So when they do a film over here, we give them tax breaks, and we're in essence subsidizing film production in this state because we're doing a government expenditure for a private project of come over here and make a film. We also have employment that happens as a result of projects, so we'll be talking about that. Not so much in the undergraduate section, but more in the graduate section. It's gonna work. Okay, not working. The economy. So some projects will really generate market benefits, others may not. For example, building a new park. It's probably not going to generate a lot of economic benefits. It's mostly non-economic or non-market because you don't buy and sell stuff. You just have a nice park, which makes your community feel better. You provide social workers. That makes your community feel better. Then we also have the environment. So the environment is something we very much value, and we often look to the government to help us keep that thing in tip-top shape. This is why God invented the EPA, because she knew back in 1970, after 1972, when Rachel Carson wrote that book in the 60s, tree hugger though she was, they learned. She lost her job, but we got the EPA. Good bargain for us, I think. And also our social system. We have a lot of reliance, and I think as we see more shootings, we start to wonder what's happened to our social system. Why aren't we better connected? How about old people? How about, my favorite example, the young people, where they're so important to have childhood education and early childhood development things, because then you have a problem for the rest of your life if you don't deal with that. Yet we spend more, 2, 3, 4 times more on retired people than we do on young children. But you know, that's the social system that we have, and we need to try and do the best job that we can. We also have other things we do. Poor people, for example, we have food programs, we have supplemental programs. In this state, we have a huge homeless problem. This is a very, very big problem, and often the homeless have many challenges that it's very difficult for them to overcome. So that's social system, and that's why we have public housing projects. So this is another area where you'll see a lot of cost-benefit analysis. But before we do a project, you really need to assess it to see if it's a good project. Because I'm just going to tell you what most people do, and let's think about this. Who thinks they're very optimistic? The most of us, when we're starting a project, think we're very, very going to optimistic and it's going to be successful. But at the end of the day, what usually happens? Stuff usually happens, doesn't proceed like we thought. This happens all the time. And what do the pessimists say? Oh, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. The reality is a lot of stuff happens, and what may look like a good project may not really be a good project. Because a lot of people will tend in their life to jump to the solution. You will assess the situation, you will decide the solution that you think, and everybody will want to jump to that answer and they think it will solve the problem. And it's rarely the case. I spent a lot of time looking at this type of stuff. I've developed software that help people examine it, because in our minds, we do have to simplify, and in our minds, we have a certain point of view. So what this does is helps us externalize the project and look at it more objectively with clear criteria that can be changed. Because when it's in your mind, sometimes we're just not quite as honest as we should be, and it causes problems in our analytical approach. Oh dear. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I erase that? Okay. So the goal of any public project is to increase social welfare. And social welfare is something economists blabble about. There is no thing called a social welfare function, but what we're really doing is looking at everybody's well-being. If you can imagine measuring that. I don't even know how we measure it, but we talk about it like we do. How's everybody doing out there? And we want you to do better. So it implies that we look at the well-being of everybody in the community and we can do trade-offs. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about something here. Pareto improvements. What that means is that if we do this project, there'll be one person better off and no one's that's much, much worse off than that person is better off. So it's an improvement. So let's just see what that means. What is Pareto improvement? So project A here benefits person 1 by +5 and project B benefits by +2. So this person here prefers A. Person 2 doesn't really like either one. It's a lose-lose operation. And sometimes that's the case. I can remember when they built H3, I was not happy about it at all. Totally ruined by $1 million viewplane. But still, it went through because the military wanted to get from Pearl Harbor to Kaneohe Marine Corps Air Station. Oh, well, what can you do? So this person didn't like either project, wants neither one. Person 3 also wants project A because they're actually going to benefit where project B they're going to lose. Person 4 really wants B. So what can we do? If you look at this, the winners and the losers on A turn out to be equal. So if we're doing a trade-off, 2 goes down, 3 goes up, but they balance out. So I make this person better off, but that person worse off. But we're not really at an improvement. We're kind of at a standoff, zero sum. Then person 1 and person 4, same position. So project A, while we have 2 people that prefer it, probably not going to be the one we're going to pick if we want to make our community better off. But look at project B. Project B, we actually have 2 winners who generate 9 points of gain, and then our loss is only 3. So we get a net increase of 6, where here we got a net increase of 0. So really, as strange as it may seem, project B is the most valuable. And even though it says person 3, it should be person 4. So person 4 could compensate person 3 and person 2 and still end up ahead by 4. And person 2 and person 3, same position. We got paid back. We're at neutral position because person 4 gave us money, so we're good. So that is what's called a potential Pareto improvement. If everybody here across the board had positives for one project, that would be a clear Pareto improvement because nobody has to compensate. In this case, we have a potential Pareto improvement because person 4 could compensate these other people because they would still come out quite ahead, actually, from this project. And that's kind of what we do with businesses. The business does a project. We let them do it. We give them a permit to build this building or do this project. And then they pay taxes. And even though maybe we didn't totally win anything from this business, maybe they kind of irritated us that they're now down the street, like we would love not to have a Walmart down the street. Maybe if that business generated a lot of positives like employment and taxes, maybe we could compensate the people that are suffering and come out with a Pareto preferred situation. So that's really what we're looking at technically. And you notice that we're putting everything in terms of measuring. This is why it kind of externalizes, and you can talk with people about what are they gaining and what are they losing. But this is distributional. So you actually see how the benefits of the project are distributed. That's the only way you can affect public welfare. And again, I've said it 100 times, net benefits need to include opportunities, costs. What did you give up? In my case with H3, I gave up this nice view, never got compensated, but I still knew I gave something up. So you should count that. And again, the opportunity cost is the next best alternative. So if you say, I could sit in this boring webinar today, or I could go surfing, those are your two best alternatives. What's the cost of sitting in the webinar? Giving up surfing. What's the cost of surfing? Sitting in this exciting webinar. So that's what you do. The cost of doing this is giving up that. That's how economists think, which is different from the way accountants and financial managers think. They don't think about what you gave up. They're just looking at the out of pocket. What am I spending on this? Not what I'm giving up over here. But when we're making decisions about which project to do, there's a lot of projects out there. The government has a ton of projects they can consider. Businesses have a lot of projects. And you know yourself, and in a given week, there's not enough time to get everything done. So you yourself could get a lot of projects, or you could waste your time. So you need to kind of start to think, what are my alternatives? And let's get down to the two best ones. And we assume that we all put our time and energy into the things that we think are the best options or the best alternatives for us. Some of us may be a little slow to figure this out, but some of us are very clear. I'm really good at this with my students that I counsel. I'm very clear. You're really good at this. You will probably be more successful if you pursue something like this as opposed to this over here. While it may seem nice, it may not be suited to your skills, so it's not your best alternative. So once you start seeing this out there and you recognize there's tons of projects, we're on the hunt for the one that has the best MPV. So here we go again. You could sleep and come to class. Opportunity cost of sleeping is coming into class. Opportunity cost of coming to class is sleeping. So you need to incorporate that, and you will see it in your assignments. What do you give up if you do this? And you need to think about that. Because a lot of us will get vested in something that economists call sunk cost. Oh, I've spent 3 years in this major. I hate it, but I'm going to graduate in it because I've already spent 3 years. If you've spent the 3 years, that alternative cannot be addressed. You can't change that. That's what we call sunk. Move on. Or, for example, you're thinking about breaking up with your significant other because you're not happy. Oh, but I've been with this person for 20 years. If it's not working, you should move forward with the new alternative. Looking at stuff you've already spent and investments you've already made is not going to make a failed project successful. So this is very useful knowledge for economists and something that other people get a little frustrated with us about, because we're always looking at the change factor. We're thinking of change. We're looking forward. We're not looking back. And so this becomes a little bit difficult because each one of us has a different notion of what the best alternatives are. So this is why we have to be objective and get it out there on the table so we can, excuse me, examine it and figure out what we're doing. And also where we disagree. That's what's the beauty of the spreadsheets also. So let's talk about how we fit this into our spreadsheet, because I think you figured out that these spreadsheets are a big deal. Anyone who's handed anything in, I've gone over these spreadsheets with red ink. Quite amazing. So we have one section that should identify where your variables are. And you'll see me that I'll list like the interest rates, all this stuff, like how many, you know, all the information as you read through the problem, you make a little interest variable section. These are the things that will change. And when you do your Excel formulas, you can just click on those. Sorry. Project analysis. So we have project analysis. So that would be an analysis of the project from its overall point of view. Then we would have the private analysis. This is an examination of the project from the private owner's point of view. Then we would have the efficiency analysis. And then we would have the referent group analysis. Yeah, what the heck are those? Let's figure that out. It's very systematic, and I will show you how you just work through them by starting with this one and adjusting. Oh gosh. So the variable section includes all the data. I don't know why. So output and input flows. What is an output and input flow? Money going out, production coming in. What the project is actually doing. Market prices. We always have to price stuff. Anything you're doing, you're going to have prices. So this is quantities, this is prices. So you can come up with net revenue, total costs, all this stuff, taxes and depreciation rates. Those are very useful when you're looking at not necessarily government projects so much, but private projects which return the most money. Got to have all that. Interest rates, we've talked about that. Inflation rates, nominal rates, real rates. I think we've actually beat that with a stick in the past 2 assignments. So the financing flows, we need to know that because we have to know how much money has to be assembled in an account in order to buy the stuff. And this mysterious beast called shadow prices. Sometimes we can't cost things. Sometimes we can't get market prices. So we have to somehow get a price for what something is worth, and this becomes a little bit difficult. Then every cell entry in the rest of the spreadsheet should come from these. So again, for your problems, you may not need all this detail, but when you're actually doing a project, you want to organize this data, because if you give it to a client or you use it yourself, it may change. Your interest rate, your discount rate that you want to use, your opportunity cost of waiting is likely to change. How willing you are to wait really depends on what you're doing at the moment and what your future looks like and how things look like. If we get in the middle of a war, we're not going to be interested in waiting. As we get older, we start to realize that we don't have time left, so we're less likely to want to wait. Your tax situation, I'm sure none of you are in a really high bracket, but hopefully you will be someday, and you'll have to worry about that. Market prices change all the time. Sometimes our output and input flows change. We get more productive or we get less productive. Stuff happens, disasters, we get sick. All these things can change. How you finance things can change. And then what things are worth. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling much more appreciative of certain things, such as having a good environment as we look around and we see all this global climate change and we realize what's going on. I find myself much more willing to try and reduce my, water use, electrical use, really try and downsize my footprint because it's getting very scary. And I think we all realize that we need to change or the environment is not going to last. We need to care for Mother Nature because she doesn't run on her own. So if we drive off of these and then every cell is linked back to these, then you can actually have everything transparent, because when you show the customer the spreadsheet or you look at it yourself, you know exactly what's happening, because you can trace those formulas like I do in class, where I click on the formula and it shows me how it's related. So you can clearly see where everything happens. You can change things so easily, and then the whole spreadsheet recalculates and you get your answer. And you can also say, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen, so I'm going to try a high, a medium, and a low. So you can just change it. And again, we're all driving off that net present value. That's all we're looking at, but we've got all this jumble we got to go through. So if you can just change a few variables and recalculate, I think it's much more efficient. Okay. So the remaining sections are just set up in these combinations of streams of net benefits to actually get the MPV or the IRR, depending on what you're trying to calculate. So let's talk about the point of view. So what's a project analysis? So you're really looking at all benefits and costs, and you're using market prices. So let me get my little, where's my pen? Huh. Gosh, it went away. What's this? No, it's not working. Okay. I thought I had a pen and then I used it and now I can't find it again. Oh, maybe here. So market prices. Okay, there we go. Market prices. So when we're doing a project analysis, we just use market prices, whatever they are. And you just call up somebody, go to the store. How much does it cost? That's what we're doing. Then when you do the private analysis, then what you do is you don't use all costs and benefits. You just take the benefits and costs that go to the private equity holder. What does the word equity mean? The owner, the private owner. If there's no private owner, then you will have no private analysis. And what this does is it kind of gives us an idea of, oh, if this is really from the point of view of just the project, and then who gets all those net benefits. Some of them will go to the owner. Some of them may go to the government in the form of taxes. Remember I said there's all these components. So taxes, so we want to start pulling out what goes to the different groups. So the private analysis is just the costs and benefits that go to the private owner. Efficiency analysis is all the costs and benefit evaluated at efficiency prices, and we're going to explain this in a minute. What is an efficiency price? Oh, it's hard. And lastly, referent group analysis. So this is something, and I don't use the word referent group analysis, and this is probably the last time you'll hear me say it. I call it community analysis. So the referent group is at the community level. What stays in the community? Do we want outsiders to come in and do projects and then go home and take all the profits home? Not necessarily. Most of us really want projects to benefit our local community, and I think it's very realistic. So we're going to divide it up into these four different types in chapter 1, because we really want to see what those differences are and how we can then represent. If we see a project that's going to cause major problems for the community, then we can actually include that in an analysis for a community group, because we understand how to do that. And we can understand what the guys downtown wearing suits are going to want to see, because they're going to be looking at it from probably, gosh, this thing is funny. They're going to be probably looking at from a project analysis or a private analysis. When you go down to the legislature, the private businesses will be lobbying. They'll be looking at it from a private point of view. The legislators will often be looking at it from a project analysis point of view, or possibly from a community point of view, because this is what they're thinking about. They're thinking about their constituents or their community, or they may be just looking at it all whole. But we want to have different points of view, because sometimes in order to get a project done, if we understood what the other person was seeing and how they were looking at it, maybe we could have more compromise. Or maybe when you go to the table, then you know what you might be willing to offer to get this project done versus just pulling something out of your ear. Oh, well, okay, let's give them a huge tax break because they're film producers and we think films are great. So this is often what we do, that the legislators are not in full-time session. They only work 6 months of the year. So it's difficult to do all this. And a lot of the people they hear from are the private sector, who sees things in black and white, profits, clear profits. But when you're dealing with other things like the environment, it's hard to really see long-term problems that might crop up as a result of a project. And sometimes we ignore them. Or the private analysis tells us they're not there because the private analysis doesn't recognize it. So this is a problem. So let me eraser myself. Oh gosh. Okay. Okay. It's kind of funny. I think maybe my mouse is running out of battery. So anyway, how do we appraise the projects from these different point of views? And why do we do this? They're all related, and so they will be having an internal consistency. And again, like I just said, we want to deal with this idea that we have constituents with different point of view, different stakeholders. So we want to look from the equity holders' point of view. Is it the public's money? Is it the private sector's money? Is it nonprofits' money? Whose money is it? That's what we need to consider when we're looking at projects. And sometimes we need to know, well, what if we can't borrow the money to make this happen? Remember now we are facing some very large public debt. So should we be borrowing to do projects? Is there enough benefits to warrant this future problem we're going to have when we have to start paying back some of this? This is the sort of stuff we need to start thinking about because everybody wants everything now. And if we take that attitude, you're going to be very prone to borrowing. And sometimes that's not really what you should be doing. We're also going to be very prone to other things because we don't use our resources wisely. Maybe large, like in the Amazon, maybe we shouldn't be cutting down that rainforest. Maybe we should be coming up with another plan for those people that really need some way to live. The last thing that's really becoming important nowadays is really benefit the community, that not everyone, I guess the millennials are very, very concerned about this, that big business is very alienating. We don't understand it. We also have a problem with big government. Apparently in our last election, we were very upset with something. So how does it benefit the community? Not just the firm or the person in Washington, D.C., or the legislature who gets elected every year on this. What is the real benefit to the community? We're getting much more concerned. And then once we get it into the community, does it really distribute through the community so it's not just rich people benefiting? We really want to be sustainable again. So this is where all this is coming from. Are we caring for the environment? Are we caring for the social structure? And are we having social justice? Without doing all these points of view, we will not be able to determine if this project really contributes to sustainability. So let's talk a little bit more about this efficiency thing, because it's a bit gnarly. So we're going to have to talk about economics. So let's just talk about what that is. Economics is the study of how society uses their limited resources to meet their unlimited wants. So it's really examining this issue of scarcity. Can't always get what you want. We all learn how to make trade-offs. This is what happens. And we discuss it a lot and we fuss about it a lot. And we all make trade-offs. But at the end of the day, even the Hawaiians with the apua'a, they tend to say that they come from a stance of there's plenty, but no, you must control how much you take, because it's kind of like when you go out on Friday night, never really meant to eat or drink all that, but somehow it happens. We will tend to overshoot, and we will use until we use it up, particularly if it's free. That's kind of how we are. So we have economic systems for a reason, because economic systems guide us in deciding what we're going to produce, how is it going to be produced, and for whom. And as soon as you have more than one person on the island, you're going to have to make this decision. Even Robinson Crusoe, once he got his man Friday, we had to make decisions about how this is all going to be decided. Who's going to do what, when. As soon as you get more than one person in the room, we're going to have this issue. So even if it's within your household, you're going to have an economic system of how the money is spent. You want to have a nice house or a nice car? I got to tell you, in Hawaii, cars win, hands down. You see so many expensive cars on the road in Hawaii. I'm always getting laughed at because I drive some old junker cars. It's a car. It gets me to work. It gets me home. It's not an investment. It's a car. It's transportation. But a lot of people here, like my neighbor that washes his car every Sunday, in fact, a lot of my neighbors do that. That car is part of their identity because they all live in houses that's full of family. They don't have their own place. And so the car becomes their own place, an extension of their person. So that's a system that decides differently than the system I was functioning when I was growing up, because we valued getting our own apartments. I would walk to school, but I would have my own place. So different things. And when we have these decisions to make, we need an allocation mechanism. Who is going to get this food and how much are they going to get? This is the big question. And this is what drives a lot of our problems through the world with this social injustice, is because the way we're allocating, it's a problem. And it creates some social injustice, and it also creates some unsustainable situations. So there are many types of allocation mechanisms. One is there's a need-based thing, and we've talked about that. We address that. We have need-based scholarships here. We have food stamps. We have a lot of need-based things, and you have to have a criteria. Or we could just share sob stories, and we have like these crowdfunding where everybody talks about their need for this money and wants people to give it to them. And it's amazing to me sometimes how much people do raise. Then we have the one that I experienced a lot in college, first come, first serve. We used to get in line for everything. And I'm sure when you register, you are thinking about first come, first serve. Who got there first gets the courses they wanted. And we have a system for queuing up. You go get concert tickets, you're in line all night. First come, first serve. And if that doesn't work out, if you're waiting in line and you're not first to get the ticket, some people get really upset. So we're kind of in gear to this, and we also kind of learned it on the playground sometimes, so we're used to that. The one that my classes always prefer is called the lottery. And we like the lottery because we think it's the fairest thing. Everybody has an equal chance of winning. So we like lotteries because it's but it wouldn't work for everything. I don't think we could sell food in the supermarket using a lottery system. Not gonna work. Not gonna work. So, just some things, it just doesn't work well. It's very time consuming. And what is it you're lotterying? If that's a giveaway, then you're gonna have to sell the lottery tickets, and then we get into that because one person is gonna get it, everyone else is gonna get nothing. Difficult. Here we have my favorite, Dictator Decides. I love it when the dictator decides because I get to hand out prizes in my 220 class to whoever I want. And we have situations through the world where the dictator decides. We have government appointees where the dictator decides. We have all sorts of situations, particularly in family settings, where the dictator decides. It works if you've got a good dictator. I'm just going to put it out there that Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi had the best educational systems in the world. They paid their teachers a lot because they valued education. So they weren't all bad, but they certainly don't have good education systems in those countries now because they got rid of those guys. So sometimes dictators are good because they can make decisions. You come to the US, are teachers valued? You ask most teachers, they would say they're not. So this is an issue. Sometimes what people value is what Kylie Jenner is wearing on her face, or the latest music thing, or sports stars making $1.5 billion. Maybe if we had dictators, we would have a little bit different stress on things if they were a good dictator. Force. Does force work? Force works. War is one of our biggest issues. We have it all over the place. It happens a lot. Force does work. Is it pleasant? No. It's very damaging to the environment, as a matter of fact. It's very difficult to deal with for certain groups, like young children. Women come out at a disadvantage here, and it sometimes can get a little bit overly expensive because when you lose, you pay a huge price, and the price of winning can also be very high. And then, of course, there's the one we learned from our grade school teachers and our moms. Sharing. Got to share. Sharing is great, but it just doesn't work all the time. The other problem, as we look at the communist system, which is based on sharing, is people just don't like to share. They're very self-interested. I'm not saying they're selfish, but they do what benefits themselves the most because of their own self-interest. Particularly if you go with like places in China, for example, they think Americans are way too open because they think that, you know, it's very obvious in China, there's a lot of people, it's very difficult to get ahead. So they're very focused on thinking that everybody understands this and you got to look out for yourself. And so you can see it, the difference in certain cultures where some will share a lot and others will not. So sharing is great, but it's difficult to make decisions about what type of food we're going to produce, what type of housing we're going to produce, exactly how the clothing stores are going to be managed and everything else based on sharing. And lastly, markets. This is the one we usually end up with because it's the most efficient and in general considered to be the most effective. So, I animated this thing. Okay. So no one is ever going to get everything they want. So when you don't get what you want, any of these systems is going to be unfair. Any of them. I have had people tell me, oh, I hate Walmart, but I have to shop there. No. You don't have to, but don't blame Walmart, right? It's like, you have to understand that we can't get everything we want. We figured this out and we have to make choices. And the one that's most efficient is, in fact, the market system. And I'm going to explain why that is. But right now, let's talk about its problems. The biggest problem we have with it is it only represents stuff that can be bought and sold. So you have to have stuff that can be bought and sold. Some people find this offensive. You can't buy and sell everything. Some people are just offended by businesses. They want nonprofits. Nonprofits are nice. They don't pay taxes. And they produce what they want to produce, not what necessarily the consumer wants to produce. So the idea is that the market system produces something the consumer wants to buy and we don't force them to buy it. So everybody is better off. I want to sell it. You want to buy it. What a great team. Everybody's better off. You're happier because you get what you want. You go into Walmart, you are giving them your money to get that stuff. Don't kid yourself. Don't act like you have to shop there. That's what's going on. You're giving out your money. They're giving you stuff. Everybody leaves happier. That's the premise of the market system, and that's why we love it. But sometimes benefits occur that are not purchased and costs are incurred that are not paid. For example, a company that pollutes water and doesn't clean it up. Doesn't pay to clean it up. So we all end up with dirty water, runs down from their store down here in our community, dirty. Big problem. Air pollution. When I was in school, they smoked in the classroom. The teachers smoked in the classroom. Everybody smoked in the classroom. Now we don't allow that because we've stopped that pollution because a market system wouldn't stop it. We actually had to pass laws to stop that. Volunteering or helping without getting paid. That doesn't mean you don't have value. A stay-at-home mom has a lot of value, but she doesn't get paid. So we tend to treat her as if she doesn't have value because she doesn't have a salary. Love, friendships, and strong communities makes us very, very happy, but we don't necessarily pay for that. well, you know, of course you can buy love for a little while, but is it really love, and on and on. And I suppose you can buy friendship for a little while, but is it really friendship, and so and so. And a strong community, of course, is really nice, but it's something that's kind of difficult and you can't buy it. You have to invest in it. You have to spend time getting to know your neighbors and caring. So it's hard. So at any rate, this is kind of what the market system looks like. So we have this supply S. So this is the supply curve and this is the demand curve. And we like to be right here because this person up here values this thing this much and it costs us this much to make it because the supply curve tells us how much it costs. This one is valued this much and it costs us this much to make it. This one is valued this much and it costs us this much to make it. So when we get to this point here in the middle where they intersect, then what we're thinking is that we're valuing that last one just what it cost us to produce it, and everything produced before that, we really valued it more. So it was a Pareto improvement to keep producing, as long as this curve right here represents all the true costs of producing that thing. But often, as I said, it doesn't. So when that happens, we have a separation between the cost that the supplier pays, supply S, and what the public actually pays. Because if we include all the costs of pollution, we should be here. Let me get my drawing tool. We should be here if we had all the true costs. But if for some reason there was some air pollution or water pollution that that the supplier didn't pay for, we would be up here. So we're essentially overproducing this thing. Right? Or this is the, excuse me, this is the private, this is the social. So here is where we are, but we want to be here because this is the extra cost of that pollution. So we should stop producing because we really do not value it the same. If we were here, that would work because the value is equal to the cost. But if we had an extra cost that we weren't accounting for, then we should stop earlier. We should stop right here, not go all the way to here. So first of all, efficiency means we are right here where we incorporate all costs. And we like markets because they tend to be efficient, because we will tend to stop there. We will not overproduce. We will not go up here because the cost of producing is greater than how much we value it, and we just won't buy it. So it will sit on the shelves, we'll put it on sale, and we'll back off. So market systems are considered very efficient as long as all the costs are included. We're going to go over this again in chapter 5, so don't be panicked if you're a little confused. But this is what we call a negative externality. And then we have let's get that off. Then we'll go to the next one. So here's a positive externality. So again, you see this little S and P. So here's the, oh my gosh. Okay, so here is the private, let me get my drawing tool. So here is the private. Oh, what have I done? So here's the private and here's the social. So what that says is that the private lies below the social. So that means that if I have to buy and sell something, if I'm buying something, I'm going to stop here, but society would get more benefits if we went to here. So we'd like to be here, but we're going to stop here because there's no way that I can charge for that. For example, if you have someone who's really nice, then they're worth it. Cheer up everybody. I got this greeter in my Rasa store at Windward Mall that's just so nice. I go in there just to hear him be so nice and friendly. I don't buy anything, but so they're not benefiting, but it's good to have him in there. He's really good. Or I had a student once that used to talk about every time he walked across campus, he would fall in love about 4 or 5 times. And I'm like, wow, you are really having a good time on campus. He really got a lot of benefits from just walking around and meeting people, particularly certain people. So he really liked it. Probably a lot more fun than sitting here listening to me on online and not coming to campus. Some of us get benefits from living next door to a neighbor that takes care of their yard, because then the yard looks nice. I have one neighbor who doesn't do that, really smelly yard, so that's a negative one, but I have the neighbor on the other side that has a gorgeous yard, and it's very inspiring, and it looks really nice, makes the neighborhood look really nice. He keeps track of everything that goes on in the neighborhood, knows exactly what's happening, so very useful, very positive. I don't pay him for that. He could stop doing it and I would suffer, but I don't pay him for it. It's stuff that you want, but no one can really pay. No one can pay for it. You can't capture it and sell it. Can you capture and sell a nice community, a friendly group? Can you capture and sell a beautiful sunset? Not really. Not really, but we'd like to be able to see them. So if there's air pollution and you can't see them, we'd like to clean that up, and we would probably love it if it was cleaned up, but we may not be willing to buy and sell it because we just can't. So this is a positive externality. Again, this is not the efficient point. The efficient point is where the social curve crosses the other curve. So this is what we're facing. We have problems in a market system that we cannot account for all costs and all benefits in private markets. Either it's too hard to charge the supplier those private costs, or we can't sell stuff and keep those private benefits. So that's really what we're looking at. Let me erase this. Oh, I'm getting better. Need to stop squiggling here. Going on. Okay, so efficiency of prices are prices that measure the marginal value of the product output or cost of the project inputs. So again, if we had a perfectly functioning market, we wouldn't even have to worry about this, but sometimes we have pollution. We have pollution. So when we have pollution, we have to worry about where that social supply curve is. And again, we're going to cover this in chapter 5 also. So we have something called the shadow price. What is the cost of pollution? We can't read it off the market curve because we don't really know where the social cost, what it is. We have to estimate it. So generally, shadow prices occur when the market is not costing or valuing correctly. There's what we call an externality. Unemployed labor. If we have labor and we put them to work, what is their true cost? If we have minimum wage and we decide we're going to raise it, the reality is you can't hire as many people. So some people are going to be unemployed. What's the cost of that employment? Do we value it at the new wage or the old minimum wage? If they were working for the old minimum wage, and I think all the minimum wage research in Seattle and San Francisco has found out that the raising of the minimum wage resulted in a lot of restaurants closing, so a lot of people lost their jobs. So now we have a bunch of unemployed labor, which was previously employed. So is it better to have fewer people making higher wages or more people making lower wages? So when you start hiring people or do projects that result in people not being hired, we got to worry about what's the cost of unemployment, what's the true cost of it. Pollution. Pollution is the classic negative externality. It happens all the time. We suffer it all the time. Noise pollution, constantly. constantly on the bus. And now we're seeing signs. Do not talk on your cell phone when you're in line. Do not talk on your cell phone here. Do not use your indoor voice, all this kind of stuff. Air pollution is a problem. We used to have the best air in the nation. Now it's some of the worst because of the fog. What do we do about that? Foreign exchange rates, we won't talk about this in our class, but sometimes you lose or win based on the exchange rates. Okay, so shadow prices versus market prices. Market prices are what you go and observe in the market, but the question is, do they cover all the costs? Do they cover all the costs? So sometimes they don't. If, for example, a market is a monopoly, where there's one seller or one buyer, like Hawaiian Electric, can we really be sure that Hawaiian Electric is just not taking advantage of it? Is it just me that thinks these cable companies, Oceanic or Spectrum, or whoever we have, is not taking advantage of it? Is it really that expensive to supply this stuff? It's a monopoly, right? There's not that many providers. And then we also have distortions like the minimum wage. The minimum wage is not set in a market. The minimum wage is a government decree that this is what you will pay. Normally, we would think that the wage rate reflects the value of what you supply to the economy. Like doctors make more than bus drivers because what doctors provide is more valuable. They invest more time in learning skills. These are very hard to replicate skills. So they get paid more. So should we pass, and I'm just going to tell you, the guys that load the freight down at the harbor make probably as much as I make. And a lot of them are ex-athletes, former athletes, local athletes. They make a lot of money. Is unloading freight, is that the same as spending 10 years in college and being a teacher? I don't know, but again, we do get some distortions through regulations and other things, unions. There are other things, I guess, that we get some distortions for. And then absent, like we just can't buy and sell clean air. We just can't buy and sell certain things. Body parts, we can't buy and sell body parts. It's kind of illegal. So that's something that we rely on people volunteering. But maybe if we could buy and sell things, it would be better. I don't know. So shadow prices are often seen when you're doing efficiency analysis, particularly with environmental goods and services. What's the value of carbon? What's the value of saving the life of a bird? What's the value of training criminals so that they don't end up back in prison? These are things that we may not be able to go to a market, so we're going to try and use some sort of shadow price, some sort of other way to value them, is what we're saying. And it's quite often seen in efficiency and referent group analysis, because the community will always get the whole impact of the project. Everyone else may go home at night, but the community will be sitting on it, particularly if it's negative like pollution. This is what upsets community. So that's, again, very important. So one more time, the referent group is the individuals from whose viewpoint the project will be appraised. So this is the people actually living and breathing with this project. Some groups will not be affected by the project at all. And if they're not affected at all, then often they won't be discussed. So it would include all the residents of the state, including the government, because they live there and the government is going to be impacted. But it doesn't include foreign entities or residents of other states or other communities. And this is what will separate it from the private and project analysis. A project from a worldwide view may be fantastic, but it just doesn't do squat for our community. It's great for the world, but it doesn't do much for me. We've heard of those. Or we have foreign buyers coming in, trying to buy hotels or do projects. That's not so great for us because they take all their money and they go home. So if we give them a bunch of tax breaks and they come over here and do something, but we don't really make a lot of money off it because we gave them a bunch of tax breaks and we didn't get the high-end jobs, we just got the grip jobs where we're just hauling around equipment, then we didn't really do much for our community because we gave them a tax break. We didn't get that. We didn't get a lot of good high-paying jobs. And the project didn't last long. So that maybe wasn't such a good project because they were not a business in this state that's going to do business in this community for the next 30 years and serve our community. So if you want to do sustainable community economic development, you're really looking for some business going to fit in with the community, employ local residents in good jobs, and be there for the long haul and provide the types of thing that the community wants. Oh, I don't really shop at Neiman Marcus, but how come Neiman Marcus is so successful here? I don't know. I mean, look at some of these high-end designer stores. You ever wonder who shops there? I don't think it's most people that live in Hawaii. I think it's a lot of visitors. So again, if those are owned by foreigners and foreigners shop there, then it's not a big benefit for us. So I think we're just about done. Here's our concluding slide. So here's how you do your homeworks. This is a very big issue. That, opportunities cost, and Pareto preferred, which I covered that slide. Opportunity cost I covered, Pareto preferred, and this. Chapter 1, third assignment, third homework. Pretty easy for this reason. Okay, so the cost benefit analysis. Let's look at this. So the cost is proposed by a foreign investor. The present value of the benefits and costs is 200 and 100. So what's the net present benefit? Not accounting for taxes and pollution, $100. $100. Because the project doesn't really care that part of this $100 goes to taxes. That's a distributional issue. What we care about is that cost and benefits. That's what we've been doing on our Excel spreadsheets. So the actual project net benefit is $100. Benefits minus costs. As long as they're all in the same time period and they're all summed up and in the same pipe, we're done discussing it. Pretty simple. Your book has all these circles, which I could never follow, so this is how I do it. Now, how do you get to the private benefit? Well, the private person pockets this $100, but then has to pay $40 in taxes. So the actual business person only makes $60 out of that 100. So you're now dividing this thing up, distributing this $100, and making sure that that benefits and the costs are accurate. So private is 60. Efficiency is 85 because we made $100, but we had $100 in cleanup costs that at some point we have to pay. So what we should have done is put that $15 in there originally, and then the government had $15 to go clean it up. But now the foreign investor has gone home with his or her $60, and I still have $15 of unpaid costs sitting in the community. That's not very efficient. We would like the person that incurred the cost to pay them. That is efficient. You incurred the cost. The people that buy from you will pay up for your costs because we've got benefits of 200 and costs of 100. We put another 15 here. Those people that produce the 200 would then give some of that money to cover that additional $15. They'd be paid. It would be efficient. The users pay. Super efficient. And then there's the referent group. This foreign investor went home with $60. We only had 100 to start. 60 gone. We left with 40. Then we had to pay cleanup costs. So we're down to 25. This is why we do not like foreign investors. Now we're down to 25. If we would have done the project ourselves, maybe we wouldn't have polluted, maybe, or we would have at least paid to clean it up or could have paid to clean it up because the money would still be in the community and could be accessed as it travels through the community. Because if you spend it in the community, it goes around and around, right? If I spend money at your store, you have profits, you spend it in his store, he spends it at her store, and then they spend it at my store. So it circles around. So $1, this $100 will usually move through the community 2.63 times or something like that. That's what we call the multiplier. So even though you're going to have that cleanup costs, we're really liking that stuff spent in the community. We like local stores. We like local stuff, even though we're all shopping from Amazon. But this is why we like local, because it keeps the profits in the community. This is why we buy local food. This is why we don't like food miles, because it keeps everything in the community, and that produces a healthy community. So, in spite of all my technical problems, we are now done. So, has anybody got questions? Anyone has questions?
Not today.
Okay, so this is pretty simple. So I promise you that assignment 3 and homework 3 can be done very speedily, particularly assignment 3. So let's stop the share. No one has questions. Then I will also, again, I have the videos, so we can do that. And we're a little bit over time. So sorry about that. Probably my technical, I didn't realize that this silly thing had such a problem. Even though it looks like it's animated correctly, it isn't. So keep those assignments coming in, and we'll see you tomorrow.